Hello, I'm Toby Hadoke, and I'm going to try and find the joy in every single episode of Doctor Who that a friend of mine challenges me to watch, and I'm going to guess what they like about it too.
Hello Toby, this is Jim Sangster. You know that guy from Liverpool who keeps popping up on the DVD extras? The story I've chosen for you to watch is the very first one. We're going to watch the Cavemen episodes. You know, the ones some older fans call the Tribe of Gum.
Well, welcome everybody. That was Jim Sangster introducing the idea that we are watching the first Doctor Who story, but without the sort of weight at the top end of the first episode. We're watching the Caveman bits, episodes 2, 3 and 4 of which this is episode 3, The Forest of Fear. Those of you watching the YouTube version, if you're listening to the podcast, there is a visual version of this which comes out a little bit later, where you can see what a mess my hair is in and how long my moustache is or isn't. I felt I'd done some lovely stuff to one of the cameras, just hitting it at the right time and making a couple of salient points and looking at the camera. Unfortunately, the camera wasn't looking at me, well, it was, but just my knee. So it's not fire that will kill us all in the end on this podcast. It is incompetence, namely mine. Apologies. I mean, I suspect not being able to see my face is not the worst thing that's going to happen to anybody, but nonetheless, I'd like to do this as well as possible, but I seem hampered by my own incompetence. Anyway, with that out of the way, let us proceed with the third ever episode of Doctor Who. Jim Sangster's going to tell us his favourite thing at the end. He's chosen the guest cast already for episode 2, so that is out. And I was there as well. I sort of talked about the cave people performances. So at the moment, it's 1-0 to me. Because for the uninitiated, my guest chooses their favourite things about the story, I have to see if I can choose the same things, and if I choose more of this, if the majority of my choices are the same as their choices, I win, which currently at the time of recording has never happened, and who knows, perhaps never will. But let's see if I do get a victory, if it's going to take place in the Forest of Fear. And so I would ask you to press play. I'm watching on the BBC DVD box set, so I will be pressing, I'm on episode select, I will be pressing select in 3, 2, 1. And so it takes a while to kick in. So if you've just pressed play, you're already ahead of me. I'm not gonna worry about that. So I've asked subscribers to my Patreon page as well. Oh, is that a plug for that? No, it's a subtle mention that is a plug if you choose it so to be. Have come to me with their thoughts, theories and observations, which I will be perhaps feeding into this as we go along. One of them is very appropriate to this episode. One of them is utter madness, and one of them is very sweet, and I'm very, very grateful to them all. So this is a refilmed episode reprise. Sometimes it's what they do is they just take a film recording of last week's and snip it on the beginning, but that's a different skull layout. I think I prefer the one from last week with the skull on its side. That one looks a bit more posed, but it starts with a close-up of the Doctor being desperately sorry. It's interesting where we sort of hang on things like that. That's quite an important moment where it shows that he's not just the entirely irascible and abrasive character that we so often talk about William Hartnell as being. That's partially because there was a sort of almost a group hallucination, I think, from people working at in the show. Those very first interviews with people that had was, oh yes, William Hartnell was very old and he was very grumpy and his doctor was very grumpy. Well, one William Hartnell was 55, which is not that old. And he may have been quite grumpy, but there's also lots of stories about him being very, very lovely. And I think he had difficulties. but also his doctor is not entirely 100% irascible. I love this. This is the 1960s, lost 1960s drama school art of holding something very still while the episode title and writer appear over it. In this case, it's Eileen Way holding a stone knife and blade, and she's looking at the camera there as well. Again, Waris Hussein shooting through some hole in the cave here, which goes to show what an inventive director he is and how ambitious he is with his camera work. I think that slightly displaces our characters and has us eavesdropping on their plight somewhat. They don't off-road. Look at the wonderful Jacqueline Hill on her front here. They're very down and dirty. They do, as we see in this story, get grubbier than I think in any other time in the classic series, the TARDIS crew. I like Ian Chesterton, William Russell there telling the Doctor, don't sit there and criticise us. He's gutsy and he's got fire, Ian, and we're working out the dynamic here, and the Doctor says it blatantly. We have to free Ian because Ian is the sort of action hero, for want of a better word. He's the one that's more likely to be able to get them out of there. But later on in this story, Ian, when they say, who is your leader, he says, oh, the Doctor is. The women get a slightly rougher deal. We there's no point in apologising for history, really. And I think within the confines and the limitation of what drama did, and sometimes when you watch other old dramas, women get a pretty rough deal across the board. So within the context of the time, we're certainly lucky with the two actresses that we have, and in spite of some of the very limiting things that they're given to do, I also think they get brilliant stuff to do. But I think in this story particularly, they do get a quite a rough deal in these episodes. Especially, I think Jacqueline Hill, who proves herself to be an absolutely superb actress and is given much better quality material later on. Fear makes companions of all of us. That's a wonderful line and one that has stuck. Hartnell looks slightly wretched there, doesn't he? Slightly, he's not dominating. He's not full of authority. He's not the stuff of legend. He's a slightly lost. A slightly lost old man there, and he's vulnerable. I like that. The other thing, Jim and I hit upon the same thing about the cave characters is that I think both Jeremy Young and Derek Newark show the sort of thought processes that the characters are doing. They are slow-witted by modern standards, and by modern I mean also 1963, and they show their characters' sort of minds sort of ticking over concepts that are difficult. This is a slide sheet, isn't it? The idea that we're stuck in a cave, we can't get out. What are those twigs in the corner? Oh, nothing. Well, except they're just covering a massive hole in the side of the cave through which you could escape. But look at the shooting also favours the faces. This isn't a brilliant example of it because he gets closer, particularly on Newark in a lot of places. Although here we are, a closeness of Alethea Charlton. He trusts his actors so much that he can get right up close to them. And look at the way that Alethea Charlton's eye sort of narrowed slightly and thought, and then brightened. Every little sort of bit of facial expression is trusted here and shows a lot that the dialogue isn't doing. Look at Newark sort of, as I say, his mind is sort of ticking over, and the black makeup on the teeth, by the way, is also very effective to try and show that these aren't 20th century humans, despite the fact that they are played by people our size, our posture, our teeth. But I think they've gone for it very well, and the faces are great. That it's really good casting. but I can't choose the actors this week because I chose them last week. So listen up. Mark Owen, not that. Oh, hang on. The first example of a polystyrene rock acting in the show's history. They do a decent job of it. You can slightly hear the polystyrene rock. It's very difficult to disguise. But viewers at the time, I mean, you were used to that sort of thing. You were used to rocks that were largely sold to you by the valiant efforts of the performers. I actually think the set design here in this series is very good. Barry Newbury, who did most of the historicals, and Ray Cusick are real heroes of 1960s Doctor Who. And that's a compromise, that hole in the wall. It was supposed to be high up, I think, and they were supposed to climb through, but there's only so much you can do in a studio. But there's little recesses in these, and the use of the skulls, and plenty of bits to shoot through. I think, seeing as it's a cave, I think the designer gives the director lots of options that he uses to their full advantage. Derek Newick does a bit of sort of twitchy eye stuff as well. Again, that suggests the whirring motors in it, the whirring synapses of this, as I say, less sophisticated human. It's great stuff. But Mark Owen, not that one. Although Howard Donald has sent me some amazing observations on the censorites. Mark Owen from my Patreon page says, I have a theory here that bounces merrily on the diving board of nerdiness and plunges into the deep end of retconning fanboy nonsense. I mean, I think it's worth it for that sentence alone. This jungle set's good too, by the way. Here goes. Episodes 2, 3 and 4 of An Unearthly Child are set on Gallifrey, the fast return switch being activated but not quite working correctly. By giving the tribe the secret of fire, the Doctor and chums take the very first step towards the technology of the Time Lords. The Doctor has written his own future from the start. I apologise for the advanced nerdiness of this, and yes, I do have a life. I'm just grateful for the chance to get this off my chest without having to compile an A5 photocopied fanzine. Well, I mean, it's a theory, and if your canon is what you want your canon to be, I'm enchanted by that idea. I actually like less the Doctor being a part of Time Lord lore and a pioneer and a history maker than a sort of slightly underachieving travelling loon who nonetheless does what is right and uses intelligence, invention and moral conviction to do amazing things despite not being the best at anything. I prefer the Doctor to be an accidental tourist rather than the stuff of legends, but that's because I think of myself as accidental rather than legendary. Andrew, I've said before and will say again, I think we create the Doctor in our own image sometimes. But I nonetheless, I like the chutzpah of that theory. I'd watch these four doing anything. Again, poor old Jacqueline Hill there has had to be scared of something. Was it off camera? I know we see the creature slightly later, and the men here have to be very concerned for the women, which dates it. But these two men are excellent. I like their fiery, splenetic dynamic that they've got there. Ian takes no nonsense, but the Doctor, the Doctor puts up a front as well. But it makes for a testy dynamic, which I really like. The camera goes nice and high there. The camera works because that's the other thing Maurice Hussein's camera does, is it creeps around in quite an unsettling way. And these sets are tiny, but they do a good job with them. And there's the sound effect there because we're gonna have the animal, which for the too much information, the sister podcast to this where I dissect this piece by piece. I'd started typing up when Zara is attacked by a bear. You don't actually see what it is, and I don't think it specifies what the animal is. And I know in early drafts it was a panther, but I think it's yes. And I know that Barbara was originally supposed to get blood on her hands here, which would make her hysterics slightly more justified, but they don't go for it as disgustingly as it was in the script. Although again, that shooting through the head of the carcass does the job. It suggests it rather. But again, poor old Jacqueline Hill. I feel for. I don't think she does anything wrong, but Barbara has to do a lot of being alarmed for quite a long time. But that's good, isn't it? When you see the travellers go, and then the two cave people come into focus, following them. And I love this shot of the four regulars, and again the light bouncing off their faces is a really good image. And again, the whole plot of this episode is basically that it's the forest of fear. It's crossing from the cave to it's the bit in between the cave of skulls and the TARDIS. Now there's this we're about to come across a slightly controversial bit, which is what Nathan Moore has emailed me about. Alethea Charlton's keening here is superb, and they're having to sell this attack without us seeing it, because that's television at the time. We can't show an unspecified animal attack for a number of reasons. So Alethea Charlton's off-screen, slightly odd but deliberately odd keening wail and the alarm shown by the travellers is what tells us what's gone on. And there's a recording break to apply a bit of bloody makeup to Derek Newick's chest. And I love her instinctive protection of her man here, and that sort of that mistrust and that, as I say, that sort of instinctive, almost animalistic protective urge. It's because I used to think of Alethea Charlton as quite a sort of mumsy sort of actress, but she's really not. It's really clever in this, and again, not award-winning type of stuff, not particularly rewarding type of stuff, but she absolutely commits, and she makes some really clever choices in a role that I think a lot of people could have just done the basics with. Nathan Moore says, the Tribe of Gum, what are your thoughts on the Doctor threatening the life of a caveman during the first story? Is it a too obvious indication of his morally ambiguous beginnings? Well, I don't know if it could be. Can it be too obvious? I mean, it is quite. Oh, it's coming up. It hasn't happened yet, but it is quite obviously staged. There's nothing in the way that William Hartnell grabs the knife that suggests he's attempting subterfuge. So he was always going to get caught. Yeah, you tell him, Barbara. And the Doctor sort of has a point. He's, funny enough, the episodes I've, can I say this because of the running order? Yeah, the episodes I've just watched actually is The Parting of the Ways, where the Doctor refuses to be a pragmatist and goes, I'm not going to blow up the whole of the Dalek fleet, which is a really interesting bookend to this, where he goes, this guy's an unsophisticated savage. that yeah, I mean, he's essentially saying that, yes, these aren't very developed people, so therefore, their lives aren't worth quite so much. Now, if you're escaping, potentially, escaping with your lives, that is not an unreasonable standpoint. It's not necessarily the standpoint you want from the hero of a child-friendly tea time series, which makes it interesting. But of course, don't say interesting, Toby. Which just play with our sensibilities. And of course, as Doctor Who fans, I think we largely go, as a bit of an aberration, that moment, because the Doctor, as well as giving up smoking, in this first story, also gives up murder. And we choose to overlook it, but it does happen. And of course, there's a contrast with what happens here, because Zar holds a knife and there's nobody there. Cal holds a knife and there's nobody there to stop him. Whereas what we're about to see now is the Doctor also pick up a knife, but it is the influence of 20th century mankind that stops him behaving like, interestingly, I need an interesting box, like the caveman that he has just condemned. He's just said, look, these people are unsophisticated savages, so we should leave him. And now he's about to pick up the knife and go and in fact kill him. And we've just seen one of the unsophisticated savages do just that, kill somebody with the same sort of weapon. So the story kind of points the finger at the Doctor in more ways than one. And when mentioning that, I love that bit that Alethea Charlton does when she's over Zara and not quite understanding the motives of the 20th century people who yes, they're not speaking a foreign language linguistically, but they are morally and in terms of motivation. And Hartnell holds himself brilliantly here, and his facial expression is absolutely fantastic. Those darting eyes, that sort of aloof pragmatism that he does. But he's not very subtle here. But it's there to it's there to illustrate that the Doctor is a shifty anti-hero, which is definitely how producer Verity Lambert always described him, as being anti-establishment and anti-hero. But they never, as I say, I mean, he's still duplicitous later on. He's duplicitous in the very next story, isn't he? His dishonesty causes the whole adventure. So it's always worth, I think, remembering, and the series does carry on reminding us. You think of Tom Baker's detachment about death, and that's just one example of and Baker's John Pertwee's arrogance, his pride. The Doctor is not always nice and likable and our friend, and yet we love the Doctor. Well, I do. Howard Lang here from the Aeneid line. Man of the Sea. If you want to find out more about him, listen to my Too Much Information podcast, where I'll tell you even what football team he supported. That's the stuff. God, Toby, you're niche. I'm like, I was just going to compare myself. I was going to say I'm like a prostitute that dresses in a cagoule and recites the lyrics of Kajagoogoo. Somebody wants me, but it's very bespoke and probably slightly perverse. The Old Mother, the first death in Doctor Who. So Eileen Way paved the way to many more murders. How many on-screen deaths have there been in Doctor Who? I'm sure somebody has done a tally. But naughty Cal, you fibber. And But you don't. But also interesting. You interesting. You don't see her die. It's an off-screen death. Funny enough, a bit like Clive in Rose when Doctor Who comes back, who also dies off-screen. And I remember thinking, oh, can you not show death on screen anymore? Doctor Who later got very bloodthirsty. But how interesting that the first character death in 2005 was off screen in the same way that the first character death is here. And of course, one of these cave people didn't make it to episode 3. Margot Maxine, I wonder where she is, who walked off set on recording day of episode 2. Oh, and here's a bit of film. Showing, the sanctuary of the TARDIS is blocked off. So they've been very quick, actually, if you think about it. And Jeremy Young having to do with his face at the end of the episode what Eileen Way, and what a face. That's a brilliant shot. And there you're really trusting your actors. But he's having to hold that for a hell of a long time as the vision mixer fades very slowly to black. I bet as soon as that was finished, he went, oh, thank Christ for that. That's the last time that credit's on, by the way. Special effects by the Visual Effects Department of the BBC. That is not on the next episode. I have to think of something to choose for episode 3. So I will pause. Oh no, I don't need to pause. It's going to go to the menu. What is my favourite thing about episode 3? Now, it could be the set design. It could be Waris Hussein's shooting of faces. But is Jim Sangster going to choose that? Is he going to choose that? It's not going to be the death of the old mother, is it? Is it going to be the Doctor threatening to kill Tsar? I mean, that's the moment of the week. That's the bit to write home about. That's the historical anomaly that is probably, if looking back now, that is the most notable aspect of the episode because of all it throws up and because it's an unusual moment and because it speaks to how different people view exactly who and what the Doctor is. And I think it's I think it's nice how the episode has Cal doing the similar thing. That's an interesting symmetry that I'd not necessarily noticed before. Barry Newbury set design, Norman Kay's music, which I haven't talked about, but it would be a cheat to choose it, having not spoken about it here. But I do like his music. I'll maybe save that to talk about next week. And I also next week have a lovely way to open with a viewer and listener who has sent me in a lovely observation about watching this with his 12-year-old son. So I'll open next episode with that. I say that as much of a reminder to myself as to you. But what will Jim Sangster have chosen? It's a tricky one. He might have chosen the set design, which is very, very good. But I think I have to be true to myself, and I think I have to say the camera work specifically is very well directed, full stop, but I think that's a slight cheat. And I love the roving camera, and I love the camera that goes through the, shoots through the set and stuff. But I particularly like the way Waris Hussein trusts his actors and goes right into the actors' faces, and we have a lot of lingering close-ups there that sort of show the complex psychology that's going on behind the eyes. And that's a great trust in your actors, but it also makes for very striking visuals because of the way that it is lit and because of the way that they are made up. And it's not just the cavemen there. I think there's close-ups of Hartnell in particular, but all of and William Russell as well. So yeah, the close-ups, the actors' faces, the roving camera, the camera work. What has Jim Sangster chosen? I bet he hasn't chosen the camera.
Best bit of the next episode, and actually it's all the way through the story, is the music, especially the escape through the forest of fear. And I think it's a real shame that none of the original recordings for Norman Kay's serials survive, because he destroyed them all. Apparently he felt that his TV work was beneath him and wasn't worth keeping. It's a small ensemble of musicians, and it really adds to the creepiness and pace of the story. I absolutely love it.
I do love the music, and I did mention it, didn't I? But it would have been a cheat, just because I happened to not concentrate upon it on this particular commentary. That's the way that it goes. That's the nature of the beast and the format. So in the Forest of Fear, I was flummoxed by my own format. I'll take that. I will talk about the music next time, I think, because I'm not going to do it now because I have moving footage to talk over, and I don't want to have gaps in that whilst I've overstayed my welcome here. So, without further ado, now that we know that the Forest of Fear is actually on Gallifrey, and they were early Shabugans on that bombshell from Mark Owen. Well, all I can say is, take that. Ta-ta. Well, it's very kind of you to listen to Happy Times and Places with me, Toby Hadoke, and I hope that you enjoyed doing so. And I hope too that you enjoyed special guest Jim Sangster. The music for this podcast is by Dave Gates, and it wouldn't be possible without the contributions of patrons, who include Ruben Herfindahl, Peter Harness, Rob Leonard, Stephen Moffat, Richard Straw, Jenny at Bluebox 99, Paul Cook, Rob Dawson, John Deere, Chris Dunford-Kelk, Siobhan Galichon, Ian Key, Joe Llewellyn, Darren Mackay, and Barry Platt. The artwork for these podcasts has been specially designed by Dylan Patterson, and on the YouTube video versions there are thumbnails which have been done by Gavin Rymill. These podcasts have their own Twitter feed, Hadoke Podcasts, at Hadoke Podcasts. Give it a follow. If you would like to be a patron, you can go to patreon.com/Toby Hadoke. Now, it's a slightly new system where you will be charged immediately upon joining, but the lowest tier is very affordable, and even with that, you get access to all of the material, which includes advance releases and exclusive stuff as well. And in the higher tiers, you could even get a badge or 5. If you can't or don't want to do the monthly thing, and that's perfectly understandable, you could do a one-off contribution at ko-fi.com/Toby Hadoke. But I know times are tough, and it'll cost you nothing, but would be hugely appreciated by me then if you could rate and review these 5 stars wherever you can, and any positive comments. They really help to tickle my algorithms, and who doesn't like an algorithm tickle? So you can do that absolutely free of charge everywhere and anywhere that you get your podcasts. Please also subscribe to my YouTube channel, check out my website, www.tobyhadoke.com, and maybe come to my comedy night at twitch.tv/Excess Malarkey every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. GMT, where it'll be me and 4 guests from the comedy circuit from around the world.